During the UN Environment Summit this year, China's Saihanba Forest Farm became the winner of the UN Champion of the Earth Award, along with the two other Chinese organizations. Saihanba, the largest man-made forest in the world, forms a natural barrier against sandstorms that protects the health of millions in the capital and nearby regions. What are the successful lessons from China's Saihanba project? And how can we understand China's continued efforts to roll back decades of deforestation and habitat destruction? What are the major implications for global climate change and local biodiversity? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Wu Changhua, former Greater China Director of the Climate Group, and Sun Xuanxin, environmental expert. We shall also cross over with Robert Nagila, CGTN correspondent in Nairobi. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui, but before we start, let's take a look at this.
More than 800 square kilometers. This is the world's largest man-made forest. Located in North China's Hebei province, it's 180 kilometers north of Beijing. Over 300 years ago, this area was one of the Qing dynasty's imperial hunting grounds. But because of excessive deforestation, overgrazing and wars, the former primitive forest was turned to sand and desert.
The altitude here is 1,400 meters, over 1,300 meters higher than Beijing. If the forest didn't exist, Beijing would be severely affected by sandstorms, just like pouring sand into the backyard from a rooftop.
To restore the local environment and block sand from hitting the country's capital city, China founded Saihanba Forest Farm in 1962. After 55 years of effort, the forest coverage rate at the farm has grown from 11.4% to 80%. The total forest stock covers over 10 million cubic meters. That's large enough to fill over 4,500 Olympic standard swimming pools. The man-made forest is able to absorb over 740,000 tons of carbon dioxide every year. It can release over 540,000 tons of oxygen and trap more than 22 million tons of dust. According to the National Meteorological Authorities, Beijing suffered on average 56.2 days from sand and dust during the 1950s. But this number has fallen to reach an average 7.5 days between 2002 and 2012. As the local environment largely improves, the forest farm itself has become a well-known tourist attraction in North China, especially in summer. That in turn helps with the farm management.
Part of our revenue comes from government subsidies. We need to finance the rest by ourselves. Now, with the help of some cooperation projects in the areas of tourism and wind power, we are able to earn enough money to support our forest management and at the same time reduce logging.
Saihanba Forest Farm is not doing all the work alone. Hebei province has built up another 3 forest farms, 360 kilometers long and 30 kilometers wide. Together, they will form a strong protective forest system for Beijing and its surrounding area.
Well, China deserves credit, of course, for its huge input into the environmental protection, despite the pullout by the Trump administration from the Paris Climate Change Pact and other commitments around the world. So what do you think of the importance of receiving such prizes in Nairobi?
I think that first it's worth a celebration. I think it recognizes China's efforts, particularly at the local level. People are taking actions and literally making investments and commitment and dedication to really bring the degraded ecosystem back to much better health, a better situation. The cases actually, I think, are made in a way, so yes, ecological challenges are severe, we all recognize today, but somehow if you take actions, if you put the resources together, and it's feasible, it's doable. And the 2 cases, Saihanba and the Kupuchi Desert, the 2 of the 3 winners actually this year for the Champions of the Earth, I think made that case very strongly.
And do you believe the 2 prizes or the 3 prize-winning projects could form more front-page stories in terms of how China should be viewed after, we come under huge pressure from the rapid economic expansion as well as the huge population itself?
I think it shows two things. First is shows the long-term dedication to environmental protection and preservation of China, because those, for example, the Saihanba take some 50 years to build and to restore the nature from the wasteland. So it's really a long-term dedication, and it also shows to the global world. While China is developing its economy, it's also taking initiatives to preserve, to restore the ecological system, to really protect the environment. And also the Mobike is also just an exemplification of how China can integrate the latest technologies and to really use to solve the issues, mobility issues we face in our megacities. Because those megacities face urban challenges unseen in other cities across the world. The scale of the population is just not comparable.
I want to put things in perspective. United Nations rolled out the Sustainable Development Agenda, 2030 Agenda. So started 2 years ago, global community decided between now and 2030 to deliver 17 goals. And the 15th goal of the SDGs actually is specifically about land-based ecosystems there. And the forest, reforestation, the degradation, desertification, all the issues actually there. Interesting enough, global community has already made a clear commitment, say by 2030, zero new growth of desertification. That's a huge ambition. So, if you look at the realities in the world today, it's continually deteriorating. We continue to face land degradation, and we're losing more and more cultivated land, forest, whatever. But now the two cases actually coming to China prove some positive sort of signals there. Basically saying there are cases proven in real life that we will be able to address those challenges and also to deliver the 2030 goals around the land, around the forestry there. So that's a huge contribution from China as well.
The last 2 decades in particular saw apparent decrease in sandstorms that used to beset the capital city of Beijing. I'd like to know why. Do you think Saihanba is just one case in point?
Saihanba does play its role in stopping the sand and stopping the sand, especially sandstorm. What we can see clearly is the decreased sandstorm days in Beijing. And I think another contributor is this just global climate change, which is really leading to the change in the macro climate in our capital cities. So, but I think if without Saihanba, things could be worse. Some people argue that Saihanba blocked the wind that's coming to Beijing to blow out the smog. But actually, because we're living in the modern city, we're growing. We have more than 4 million, 5 million vehicles on the street now. So, of course, you will have smog. But you can't blame Saihanba. But it's more you need to really tackle the smog issue.
There is perhaps a reason behind the blame game. Why netizens or viewers or those who care about the environment protection cite Saihanba as an excuse to complain about the increase of hazardous fog in the capital city. Let me cross over to Mr. Robert Nigella, our CGTN correspondent, who's standing by in Nairobi to brief us about the latest. Hello, Robert. Why is the annual Champions of the Earth Prize a big deal? And how can the winners represent different commitments and visions from around the world?
Well, a very good afternoon to you and your guests. Well, the award is a big deal because first it is the top United Nations Environmental Award that is that basically celebrates or honors individuals that have been outstanding and have made a huge impact on the environment either around them or elsewhere. And that's what those individuals who received that award have done, truly outstanding individuals. Now, in terms of what can be adopted or how we can look at this, basically, we need to look at some of the models that were employed as they were going about this environmental work that they were doing. Is it something that we could borrow a leaf from and replicate it elsewhere? I mean, the fact that bringing up a whole forest from a desert region, that takes quite a lot of undertaking. And these are individuals who are basically selfless, people who were not doing it for themselves, but for the better good of all. So it does say quite a bit about them, and that's one of the reasons why they were so well received yesterday. And perhaps it's not just about looking at or employing some of the models that were being used by them, because it depends from region to region, which we know that can be roughly very, very different in terms of what you need to do on the ground for to stop environmental degradation and stuff like that. Their knowledge as well is very, very useful. And I dare say that we could learn quite a bit from them, not just in terms of how they went about it, but their energy and the reasons behind why they were doing it, which are very, very important to tomorrow's world. Back to you.
Right. Those who were awarded for the special contributions to the forestation in Saihanba should also deserve credit for making huge positive contributions to the improvement of the environment for the whole region of Northeast Asia, because this is, after all, a very good public service and public product. Second question, Robert, what's the international reaction towards China's 3 winning projects at the UN Environment Summit?
Oh, it's been absolutely one of amazement, really. And I can tell you something, being at that gala last evening as they were receiving those awards, they became instant celebrities, really, because of what they had achieved and the reasons behind why they went ahead and done it. And I was talking to quite a few people who actually met them after that prize-giving ceremony. And a lot of people were basically saying that they were honored, privileged to be not just talking, but to even just be in the same room with them because of what they had achieved. And people actually saying that, look, if we could just do even 1/5 of what they did, the world would be a much, much better place. And these are people that you would basically just pass by on your day-to-day business without even realizing what they had done, if not for this award. And I know that they are very well known in Asia through their backgrounds in business, for example, and some of their achievements there. So these are outstanding individuals, and perhaps we could borrow a lift from some of that. Now, they've received a lot of praise from the United Nations Environmental Programme for their achievements. They've received a lot of praise from the member states that were attending this particular conference. Kenya's president lauding that effort from them. We also had from the presidents of Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago. We had from some of the environment ministers here, all praising this achievement from these individuals and what they had managed to achieve. Forget about the time it took to achieve that, but it is the energy, the reserve, the resolve to make this world a better place through what they were doing that is receiving a lot of praise. And speaking to one of the delegates here, they're saying that, you know what, you need to look out for these individuals over the next coming years, because this is not it. Such people who do such great things are bound to do even greater things and in the field of environment. So this is one to watch definitely in the coming years because of what they've done and what they've achieved and what they will achieve over the coming years as well.
Thank you so much, Robert. That's a correspondent coming from Nairobi. Of course, warm congratulations should first and foremost go to Chinese individuals who won so big in Nairobi. However, there's yet another brilliant individual who generated many front-page stories and headlines a few years ago. That's Al Gore, former Vice President of the United States. The mere mention of this name, I know from your smile, you immediately understood why he deserved the credit for winning the laureate of the Nobel Peace Prize. Mm-hmm. But did he also attend the summit this time around? And what did he say? I mean, why did he make such special contributions?
I don't know whether he was in Nairobi or not, since I was not there, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that. Al Gore, actually, I think we all recognize his leadership, his contribution about raising awareness, bringing the scientific knowledge to the general public, to the policymakers, general public, so that the global community starts to have much better understanding of the climate change issues itself. And he's been continuing his efforts, and one of the things he's been doing, he's literally been training people, ambassadors, so that people not only just know it, but also talk about it and advocating the solutions there. So he's been doing all over the world, a few sessions every year in different parts of the world. And besides that, he himself also stepped into investment. He feels that, he needs to not just talk about it, advocating it, but also he needs to take action to put the investment in technology solutions in order to really address the climate change issues in reality. I bumped into him from time to time, particularly through the World Economic Forum session. I've seen him a couple of times this year. Wherever he goes, where I bumped into him, actually, he continues his leadership. That needs to be very well appreciated as well.
He lost the presidential campaign to Bush Jr. despite the winning of popular votes. That's perhaps the vulnerability with the American electoral system. Let's come back to examine the Saihanba issue. Saihanba Forest purifies 137 million cubic meters of water for the Beijing-Tianjin area and can already deliver 500,000 tons of oxygen. What does that mean for the air quality in the area?
It really purifies the air quality in the northern areas, like we talked about. It blocks the sand from coming south. Actually, one of the main reasons why they built Saihanba is really to block this Hunshan Dake sand, which is in the Inner Mongolia plateau, and which is about some 180 kilometers away from Beijing. Imagine your capital just not so close to a sand. That's like real threat facing the city hosting some 20 million people. So I think one of the big significance of Saihanba is really to have this ecological buffer to be there and to block the sand. And also, it is also the origin of the river of some of the rivers in this area, which also preserves the very important ecological resource for the rivers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me add that. So, purification of the water, the air, including generating oxygens. Those are the benefits generated from, the forest farm through those nearly more than half a century's efforts by those people. And of course, because it's a state-owned farm, so the government definitely have been probably mostly investing in that process. But I don't think government is the only player in that process. They've been, as we shown earlier in the beginning of the film actually, and they also started to raise money from other sources through other projects, innovative projects as well. The issue I want to talk about, the forests are actually a very critical ecosystem in our universe. So besides the air, the water, and the oxygen, it also actually provides the food safety, shelter, we sort of mentioned, and climate resilience, talk about biodiversity, and also even homeland for a lot of people, in those local community. So when you have those values already generated from that forest farm, I think the decision makers, the market, needs to look at it and say, wait a second. In China, there's something called ecological compensation, meaning, people working in there through all this years, half-century years of work efforts, are generating benefits to people in Beijing, in Tianjin, in the nearby regions, and we need to pay for that services there. So I feel very positive in a way. I'm delighted to learn the case. I'm delighted that this case is awarded, and I believe that's going to also add more trigger to speed up the policy reform in China in terms of really implementing the ecological compensation system that the government has been advocating.
In an age of global warming, I wonder how important is carbon sequestration. By the way, what is the size of a forest cover in China? I mean, this has a lot to do with the carbon sequestration and our quality of life, in particular the air quality. What can you tell us? The forest cover.
I think we have about now nearly 20-ish, I think nearly 30% of the coverage. The number has been increasing. So every 5 years, actually, the government has been, upgrading the numbers. So it's one of the policy targets the government has been leading, has been driving in order to increase the forest coverage. And
we are aware of the growing momentum in forestation or reforestation in China. But many international critics have pointed out that China's reforestation or forestation means deforestation elsewhere, outside this country. For example, China is one of the biggest timber importers, and we produce furniture for European and American countries. And therefore, people don't know the carbon sequestration as a result of this. Do you think this is a dilemma?
To a certain extent, yes, it is. Or the reality has been telling us that has been a challenge. But there are alternatives. I don't think this is a China unique sort of situation. If you look at Japan, Japan probably has one of the world's highest forest coverage. They don't cut down their own trees. More than 80% of the country is covered by forest, right? And Japan also use timbers. They import from other parts of the world. I don't see anything wrong in terms of importing timbers from other parts of the world. The fundamentally is the issue how you do the timber, right?
You're referring to the illegal logging.
Illegal logging, or there's something called, sustainable forestry.
Yeah.
So there is even certification program already implemented globally. So it's not like, yes, we have to rely on timber from other parts of the world. We have to damage the forestry all over the world, and we are doomed, whatever. No, it's not. I think that, in terms of the demand, whatever the volume, I think that's a different issue. But in terms of how do you, cut the timber, whatever, select the timber, cut down which tree, that there's already very well developed program practice already happening, and China definitely has to adopt that.
Yeah. And also one thing to add, just in the short term, the demand for this for the timber is constant. The demand is there, in a short period. But in order to make demand, you either cut down trees in the ecologically vulnerable area, or you can cut down trees in the more less vulnerable and actually sustainable farming, sustainable timber.
Like Canada.
Yeah.
Canada Prime Minister was here, and if you look at the deal signed yesterday, and Canada doesn't really have a lot of people, but they have a lot of forests. In order to really maintain the sustainability of forestry, they have to cut down a certain number of trees every year in order to prevent wildfire, whatever, stuff like that. So China now working with Canada and to import more timber from, sustainably managed forestry. So there are solutions. I don't think China needs to be particularly blamed, actually, for relying on international market for timber.
I wonder if similar agreements have been signed with Russia, where we import much of the timber. We import most of the timber from Southeast Asia, like Myanmar, even Papua New Guinea in Pacific Ocean, as well as Russia, the Far East Siberia.
Those are the weak points, actually. So that's why I'm sort of advocating. I think China, as a responsible leader at the global level, particularly for environmental governance, China has to literally really change its behavior and adopt the most responsible practice.
In some of the underdeveloped areas, such as Heilongjiang, Liaoning, Jilin, what we call northeastern region of China, do you think there has been a burgeoning public awareness about ecotourism? I was impressed, for example, quite a few years ago by the very green ecosystem in Mudanjiang, which shares the border with Russia. Yet the local economy trails way behind prosperous coastal areas in China by years. So I believe you guys have been to these remote areas, border areas. How important do you think the local governments have rolled out measures and policy options to show up the eco-tourism?
My view, I think ecotourism has been recognized as one of the emerging sort of rising industries for many parts of the country, and particular for ecologically rich regions like northeast part of China. And because today, if you look at laws regulations, they are not allowed to continue carry on the heavy polluting, heavy energy consumption industries anymore. There's no market demand for that sort of heavy industries either. So what are the alternative livelihoods they need to create? And relying on the local rich, forestry or ecosystem there, the ecotourism definitely is one of the options there. In the meantime, I cannot speak on comment on whether local governments really have done the best job or not. But I think ecotourism, this is a direction aligned with the national agenda called ecological civilization. We're literally turning green to gold. And so turning ecosystem goods and services into some products, commercially benefiting local economy, that's definitely absolutely the direction to go. There might be space that needs to be improved, but in the meantime, I think it's already pretty popular, widespread ecotourism industry already out there.
Well, other than Saihanba, two other Chinese organizations, MOBAC and Yili Group, were recognized for their outstanding contributions to the protection and restoration of the environment. You are an expert of sustainable transportation. How significant is this prize for MOBAC, which I believe distributes its vehicles throughout the world and has helped build a good reputation for China's environmental protection?
I think MOBAC is really good epitome of the symbol of like latest technology. You have mobile phone apps, you have like Internet of Things, you have like mobility on demand. So all those new innovative technology are all included in MOBAC, and it's also designed and manufactured in China. So it's really a national pride, so to speak, and also really solved our like mobility in our cities we face, because in mega cities like Beijing and Shanghai, people are traveling longer distance. For example, you travel more than 5-10 kilometers, commute to your work.
We understand the merits and advantages of sharing bicycles, but increasingly dwellers in Beijing and Shanghai complain about the mess that is created by the
random parking.
Random parking, yes, that's the phrase. So what do you think of the solution? Since this sharing bicycle is a product of smart digital technology, can we rely on the digital technology in seeking a solution to this problem?
Of course, I think the system can provide a reward to the users to like park bicycles to a less populated area. That's one solution. And also, like, I think government should also take initiative, because what's happened with MOBAC is that the cities just let the system to grow and just to see like how it's phased out. Yeah.
Then step in.
Yeah. And I think that's about the time that the city government steps in, and they will actually started to implement like city-made like parking areas for shared bicycles. That also like can help solve part of the parking issues.
Any problems with the behavior of the Chinese nationals? Since we've been to European countries and other countries where we see MOBAC, it's omnipresent, but they didn't have this problem of random parking. Why did we have this prominent embarrassment?
I wouldn't really totally pointing finger to all the individuals actually in our country.
You think it's a matter of a poor governance and poor management?
I think everything, to be fair actually, this is sort of innovation. This is a new thing, right? No one could have imagined way before. See, I know exactly how to, govern this. I think this is a learning process for innovation. And, as we're talking about here, now is the time. Because MOBAC was rolled out to 2014, so it's now 2017, so 3 years passed. We pretty much learned about the benefits and also the sort of weaknesses there. So now the government, not only the government, I think the company itself, the society needs to come together and trying to figure this out. I think the good thing about it is integration. It's a model of integrated technology, modern technology, internet technology there. It's a new alternative economic growth model. It's called the sharing economy. It's benefiting tremendously about reducing reliance on cars, vehicles in cities, reducing the emissions. In the meantime, it's providing all the convenience to the public. But now, of course, we need to figure out how to address this messy situation.
It's indeed a part of the green transportation that we advocate. Thank you so much for being with us. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.